Chapter 22, Sing Down the Moon. And I'm going to read chapter 23 and finish the book. So I'm starting on page 119. The snows melted and warm winds blew over Bosque Redondo, and green grass began to show along the banks of the river. The big gate at the fort opened every day. The long knives marched out, the drums beat, and horns sounded. Then the soldiers went back in, and the gate closed. I waited every day, but my husband did not come. With spring settled on the land, the wagons brought more food for us, and I was able to save another gourd of flour. We now had enough food to last us on a journey of 6 days. Besides the 2 good blankets, we had a knife, which was like those the soldier used on the ends of their rifles. I found it on the mornings when I went up to the fort. It was wrapped in a cloth and hidden in the grass. I sharpened it on a stone and put it away in the lean-to. The cloth, which was an arm's length of red velvet, would make a girl's small dress or a jacket for a boy. It was a warm night with many stars and the sound of the river running far away. We had just eaten our supper when Tall Boy came. He walked in so quietly that my black dog did not hear him. He sat down at the fire and ate everything that was left in the pot, hurriedly as if he had never eaten before. He looked gaunt and fearful. My father said, "Did the Long Knives open the gate for you?" "They did not open the gate," Tall Boy replied. "The gate was not open?" "No, but you are here." "I am here because of a hole in the wall," Tall Boy said, "which I have known about for many weeks." "Where is this hole you have known about?" "It is in the place where they cook the food." "Is it a round hole or one that is square?" "Neither one nor the other," said Tall Boy. "It is a hole where they shove all the garbage." "Yes, I have heard of this hole," my father said. "The garbage goes through and falls on the ground outside the wall, and the people go there and pick it up." "That is the hole," Tall Boy said, "of a size right for crawling. When no one looks, when everyone has left the place where they cook the food, and the people have come and carried away all the garbage. That is the time," Tall Boy said. "When will the Long Knives know that you have crawled through the hole?" "In the morning when they come to cook breakfast, not sooner nor later?" "Then," my husband said. He sat staring into the empty pot. I brought him a bowl of corn mush, which he ate in a hurry, and then he fell silent, sitting on the haunches with one arm dangling and the other on his thigh. I thought that he would get up at any moment, that the 2 of us would flee the camp, but he sat there beside the fire, looking as if he might fall asleep. "The Long Knives will come in the morning," I said. "You will wake up behind the walls of the fort again." He glanced at me, blinking his eyes, and I suddenly knew that he had gone as far as he wished to go. He was back with his family. He had eaten our food. He would sleep beside our fire. What happened to him tomorrow did not matter. He was still blinking at me, halfway between waking and sleeping. "Are you an old woman?" I asked him. He stopped blinking. "An old woman," I went on, my voice rising. "A woman who eats a lot and dozes beside the fire?" My mother said, "He is worse than an old woman. He is like the old men of the Navajo. All of them." Tall Boy got to his feet and unhitched his belt, making room for the big supper he had eaten. My mother looked at him at his feet. She would have liked to look him in the face as she did with me when she was angry, but it was against our tribal law for a mother-in-law to look at her son-in-law this way. She looked at his feet for a long time. That would be a little bit of cultural belief there. "He will soon have to change his name again," she said. "What do you think it should be? Boy who sits at the fire? Boy who sleeps standing up? Or something else like crawling through a hole?" "I will need to think hard," I said. "We shall both think hard," my mother said. Tall Boy looked at my mother's feet and then at me. He walked slowly around the fire and went outside. I heard him take a deep breath. I stood there and felt like crying. I had not cried since the day we left our home. After a while, I sat down beside the fire and cried. I cried for a long time, and nobody tried to stop me. Then Tall Boy came to the doorway and spoke my name and beckoned me to follow him. When I went outside, the first thing I saw was the old speckled horse that belonged to my father-in-law. "We go now," Tall Boy said. He made a saddle of the 2 blankets and tied down the gourds that were filled with flour. The sharp knife he put in his belt. We did not say goodbye to our family. They knew that we would take their thoughts with us and leave our thoughts for them. Tall Boy got on the horse and we set off through the warm darkness. I had to run to keep pace with him, but when we got to the river, he let me climb up behind him. I untied the 2 gourds and hung them around my neck to keep them out of the water. My black dog I held in my lap. The river ran swift and cold. As the horse plunged into the water, the current swept us out and then back to shore. On the 3rd try, we kept going toward the far shore. We would have drowned except for the old horse. He must have been across the river many times in his life, for he knew how to float with the current and swim if he needed to. There was no moon, but all the stars were out, shining on the water. When we reached the shore, I jumped off the horse and we went along the trail we had used once before. Someday I hoped to have a horse of my own, and then I would ride beside my husband. Perhaps he would not own a horse by this time. Then it would be he who would have to walk. A little bit of tradition there too. Across the river, the evening fires of Bosque Redondo glowed softly. We left them far behind, moving along the trail until dawn. Then we made a fire and cooked some mush beside a small lake. My husband said, "This is the time the Long Knives will find that I have gone. We have the night between us, but they will come fast. They will not follow us," I said to calm him and myself. "There are thousands of Indians at Bosque Redondo. Will the Long Knives bother to look for one? And if they do, which way will they go? If they do anything, it will be to search the village. Our friends will tell them nothing." We slept until the sun was high and awakened to the barking of my black dog. There were soldiers on the trail. By putting our ears to the earth, we could hear the steps of their horses. But they came from the west. From our hiding place, we watched them pass, driving a small band of Navajo toward Bosque Redondo. Tallboy pulled the knife from his belt, and I think that he would have rushed out and attacked the soldiers alone if I had not pleaded with him. As it was, we made so much noise that one of the Long Knives stopped his horse and looked in our direction before he rode on. We left the small lake and rode to the northwest, but we had not gone far when my husband said, "There are places closer than Canyon de Chelly where we can hide. These places are safer also. The Long Knives do not watch them like they watch the canyon." "But the canyon is our home," I said. "We have lived there. We know where wood is and water and food. The sheep, what of the sheep?" I was walking beside him and he glanced down at me in scorn. "Sheep? They are eaten by the wolves, as I have told you," he said. If there are some left, what do we do with them? Where can we graze them that will not be seen by the Long Knives?" "We will be careful where we graze them," I said. "There are hidden places that I know." He shrugged his shoulders, which he did when he did not want to talk about something, and fell silent. We went on for 6 suns, ate the last of our flour, and then snared rabbits and squirrels. I was certain that my husband had decided to go to Canyon de Chelly after all. But on the 7th day, Tallboy left the trail and we went northward over a bridge into wooded, rolling country. He had hunted there once and called it Elk Running Valley. A stream ran down from the high mountains and wandered through a meadow until it came to a dam beavers had made from brush and trees. There the stream backed up and formed a small pond with grassy banks. We built a hut beside the pond and lived in it through the summer. It was here that my son was born. After that, Tallboy brought down poles from the high country, dragging them behind the speckled horse. He made the hut larger and strengthened the roof for winter snow. He fashioned a throwing stick and killed 2 young deer. He was busy all the time hunting and making something. He still could not use his injured arm, but he had become quick and skillful with the other one. He no longer seemed to think about his injury. I was busy too. I worked the deer hides with a bone scraper and softened them in my mouth and made a pair of leggings for my son. I also made him a jacket out of the velvet I had saved in a heavy coat from a beaver pelt. Yet not a day went by that summer, or when the snows came, that I did not think of my sheep. It's just her way of life and her focus. All right, we're on the last chapter, chapter 23, page 128. One morning, early in the spring, while we were eating breakfast, soldiers appeared on the ridge. Our lean-to was hidden among the pine trees and could not be seen from where they stood. Nor could they see the speckled horse, which was tethered beyond the lean-to. We felt uneasy nonetheless. The Long Knives came down from the ridge, riding fast. We were ready to flee, but they turned away from us and headed into the south. "The Long Knives will travel for 1 day. No longer," Tallboy said. "I have been in the canyon where they are going, and they cannot get through. They will have to turn back. We can look for them tomorrow." We finished eating our breakfasts. The spring sun was warm. Beaver were working on their dam, cutting brush on the banks and swimming across the pond with it. Tallboy sat with his son in his lap and watched them for a long time, going back and forth. Then we loaded the old horse with our clothes and some dried deer meat and left Elk Running Valley before the sun was high. We kept off the trail the soldiers had used. At the top of the ridge, we went north and west. It was the direction of our canyon, but I was afraid to ask my husband whether we were going there or not. If we were, then it would be better not to ask him. Sometimes if he was asked too many questions, he would change his mind and do something else. Kind of sounds like your parents probably. I was not certain that we were going home until on the evening of the 5th day I saw high ramparts against the northern sky. They were crimson in the setting sun. Even the tall trees along their edges were crimson. I felt like shouting and dancing, like running around in circles as I always did when I was very happy. But I walked quietly through the spring grass as if I saw nothing there in the sky. Tallboy was riding in front of me. He spoke and pointed into the north. "Yes," I said calmly. "We go because I am tired of hearing about sheep," he said, "and for no other reason. It is a dangerous place to go. There are no sheep left, but still I go. If there is one left, it will be shaggy like a buffalo and so wild you will have to catch it in a trap. But I go because I am tired of the sheep talk. Oh, coyote brothers in the far and near hills, I am tired of sheep." He nudged the speckled horse and rode on, out of sight. My son was strapped to a carrying board slung over my back. I stopped and took him out of the harness and held him in my arms. The crimson ramparts had changed to gold, and gold mist drifted over the sky. I turned his head so that he faced the stone cliffs as they changed to purple, and the first star came out. The next morning, Tallboy left to go into the canyon. He wanted to find out if any of the Long Knives were camped there, or if other tribes, the Apache or the Utes, had come while we were gone. The old horse had grown slow and lame, so he left it behind and went on foot. In 2 days he returned, carrying a braided rope, which he had picked up somewhere, and 2 horseshoes. "I saw no Indians," he said, while we were breaking camp. "No signs of the Long Knives. Nothing has changed." After a time, not right away, I asked, "Did you see any of my sheep?" "Once," he said, "on the trail to the mesa." Or he said, "One," he said, "on the trail to the mesa. It had more hair than a buffalo." At first I thought it was a buffalo. "It has not been shorn for a long time," I said. "Nor will it be shorn soon," my husband answered. "It is wilder than a mountain sheep. You will have to catch it in a trap. But after you catch it, how you will shear it, I do not know." "I have shears," I said. "I hid them in the cave when we left." "You hid many things," Tallboy said. "We will need many things," I answered. She's smart. The river ran full. Blue snow water brimmed over the banks and flowed into the meadow. The cornfield was the same field the Long Knives had left. The peach trees, which they had stripped of bark, stood in black rows. Our hogan was still a ring of gray ashes and tumbleweeds. We stopped there and talked, deciding where we would go. "The high mesa is safe," my husband said, "but if the Long Knives come, we will be cut off from water like we were before." "From water and from the sheep," I said. "What sheep?" Tallboy asked. "The one that looks like a buffalo?" "There is a small canyon where the river forks," I said. "I have been there with my sheep. It has grass and spring comes out of a rock. It is hidden from the big canyon so that you can pass by and not know it is there." "Let us go then to this place," Tallboy said. I started off, leading the way along the river to the big rocks that stood at the entrance to the hidden canyon. The rocks and the gnarled sycamores that grew among them formed a low, winding corridor, and Tallboy had to climb down from the horse to get through. Hidden Canyon was just as I remembered it. The yellow cliffs rose on all sides. The spring flowed from the rock and made a waterfall that the wind caught and spun out over the meadow. On the far side of the meadow was the grove of wild plums, where I had picked many handfuls of fruit. The trees now were covered with white and pink blossoms. But I had forgotten the cave. Tallboy saw it at once. "A good place," he said, and went off to explore it. The cave was on the face of the western cliff where the morning sun shone first. It was about 30 feet from the ground and twice that many feet in width. To reach it, there were handholds cut into the soft yellow stone, but some were worn away and I had never tried to use them. Indians had lived there a long time ago and left. No one knew why. Tallboy started to chip away at the handholds using the knife I had found at Bosque Redondo. He dug out 4 of the holds and tried them. I held my breath. I feared that he would never be able to make his way up the face of the cliff. Even with 2 good hands, it was not easy, but he went up and came down without trouble. See, he said to his son, it's easy. Before long, you also will be able to climb. For your mother, we will stretch a rope which she can hold on to. Clouds were gathering, and he started working on the handholds again. While I watched him, my black dog pointed his ears, and I heard a small noise. It came from the far side of the meadow, near the wild plum trees, and I walked in that direction. I had not gone far when, out of the tall grass, I saw an ewe looking at me. She turned away as I reached her, but did not flee. Her coat was thick and full of burrs. Beside her was a lamb, not more than a few days old. I took my son from his carrying board and held him up so that he could see the lamb. He wanted to touch it, but with both hands he was grasping a toy which his father had given him, a willow spear tipped with stone. Tallboy had made up a song about the long knives and how the spear would kill many of them. Every night he sang this song to his son. I took the spear and dropped it in the grass and stepped upon it, hearing it snap beneath my foot. My son touched the lamb once before the 2 moved away from us. He looked up at me and laughed, and I laughed with him. Rain had begun to fall. It made a hissing sound in the tall grass as we started toward the cave high up in the western cliff. Tallboy had finished the steps and handholds and now stood under the cave stone lip, waving at us. I waved back at him and hurried across the meadow. I raised my face to the falling rain. It was Navajo rain. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story. You're going to finish the Learning Journal, pages 28 and 29. 28 is just the matching vocabulary. And 29, it says for chapters 22 and 23, how do the Navajo's cultural beliefs and values guide them? Think about, what they relied on. Think about what they believed in, maybe even kind of their strong characteristics of the women and the men. And then you're going to give at least one example found in these chapters with Bright Morning and or Tallboy. There's no right or wrong as long as something, as long as there's something in there that you find. Make sure you explain yourself, okay? And you're just going to have to make a little text box probably, unless you have like a little pen or something. All right, good luck. I'm going to go ahead and finish the postscript, and then we'll be done with this entire book. So on page 135, Sing Down the Moon is based upon 2 years, 1863 to 1865, in the history of the Navajo Indians. Before this time, many treaties were made between the Navajo and the United States. Most of them were broken, some by the whites, some by the Indians. In June 1863, the United States sent Colonel Kit Carson through the Navajo country, centered in what is now northeastern Arizona, with instructions to destroy all crops and livestock. At the head of 400 soldiers, Carson pillaged the land, pursued fleeing bands of Navajo, and killed those who fought back. He asked help from the Utes, traditional enemies of the Navajo, promising them the livestock, the women, and the children they captured. Word was sent out that all Navajo were to give themselves up, and early in 1864 they began to surrender. By March, they had started on their long journey to Fort Sumner, 180 miles southeast of Santa Fe, New Mexico. A total of 8,491 reached the fort. A few small groups hid like beasts in the depths of the Grand Canyon and the heights of the Black Mesa and the other inaccessible places. This 300-mile journey of the Navajo is known as the Long Walk. To this day, Navajo men and women speak of it with bitterness. And if you talk to a Navajo child for more than a few minutes, he will tell you the story. He has heard it in the cradle and learned it at his mother's knee. The Navajo were held prisoners at Fort Sumner until 1868. Late in that year, they were set free, each with a gift of a sheep and a goat. Poorly clothed to meet the coming winter, without horses or wagons, they left on foot. Their new home was a wilderness, located in the Four Corners country, a sandy, windswept desert of little rain. It was near the Canyon de Chelly, but it's actually pronounced Canyon de Chelly, where the states of Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico touch. The massacre that Bright Morning speaks about was led by a preacher named J.M. Shivington. With a company of volunteers, he rode out from Denver in 1864 and set upon a sleeping village of Arapaho and Cheyenne, killing everyone, 75 men, 225 old people, women, and children. Some 1,500 Navajo died at Fort Sumner from smallpox or other diseases, but the group who survived has grown to more than 100,000. The Navajo wanted to live. Like Bright Morning, they thirsted for life. They still do. You will see girls who look much like her tending their sheep now in Canyon de Chelly. They are dressed in velveteen blouses, a dozen ruffled and flounced petticoats, their hair tied in chignons, I think, a style copied from the officers' wives at Fort Sumner long ago. So you can see where the history comes into play. So that was written by Scott Odell. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did reading it to you. And there's also going to be a quiz, 25 questions on Google Forms that I will be posting too.